The views and opinions expressed on America's Workforce Union podcast and its digital media channels are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily represent the views and opinions of the producers or sponsors.
Welcome to the America's Workforce Radio Podcast, the flagship production of the American Workers Radio and Podcast Network, where organized labor and its never-ending fight to protect the rights of the American worker come first. Now, presented by LIUNA, Laborers International Union of North America. Here's your host, Ed Flash Ferens.
A ruling from an international court on your right to strike. Meanwhile, Major League Baseball issuing its first counter-proposal with the Players Union. And today on the show, the president of the Ohio AFL-CIO. Welcome to the Wednesday, June 3rd edition of America's Workforce, where we're available on at least 5 platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and Pandora. Tim Burga will be our featured guest on the show today, longtime supporter of America's Workforce. He serves as president of the Ohio AFL-CIO. Website is ohioaflcio.org. I had a chance to link up with Tim a couple of weeks ago at the Cleveland Port Council meeting, one of several meetings that Tim has attended in a number of cities, 7 cities altogether, along with Cleveland, Columbus, Cincinnati, Dayton, Akron, Toledo, Marietta, more to come. And all this has to do with getting everybody mobilized for the November elections. And he's going to talk about the turnout in the May primary and the topic of conversation among union leaders. Also, we'll take a look at what's on the state agenda. There is a proposal to enshrine voter ID into the state constitution, and that may happen in the weeks ahead. And right now, voter ID is required in the state of Ohio, courtesy of the Ohio legislature, but now they want to enshrine it into the Constitution. This reminds me of what Tennessee did some years back, where they enshrined right to work into their state constitution. Some states just don't like unions, all right? So Tim Burga will be our featured guest on the show today. Now, a brief look into the world of labor. This segment brought to you by Boyd Watterson Asset Management. You can find more at boydwatterson.com. The International Court of Justice has issued an advisory opinion holding that the right to strike is, in fact, protected under the International Labor Organization Convention number 87, which is better known as the Freedom of Association and Protection of the Right to Organize, which is an international treaty ratified by member states going back to 1948. Now, that opinion comes 2.5 years after the ILO, which is a UN agency comprised of governments, employers, and workers from 187 member states that work together to actually establish labor standards and policies that protect workers across the globe. In a 10-4 vote, the International Court of Justice concluded that protection of the right to strike is encompassed in the protection of the freedom of association provided for in Convention number 87, because strike action is one of the main activities engaged in the tools used by workers and their organizations to promote their interests and improve conditions of labor. That's a quote. Advocates anticipate that this decision by the highest international court will influence countries that have not yet recognized the workers' right to strike. We'll see what happens on this one. You know, there's some are saying that there might be a baseball strike next year. Well, here's the latest. Major League Baseball has issued its first counter-proposal in negotiations with the Players Union, officially declaring the league's intent to implement a salary cap and floor in professional baseball starting next year. Now, the union made its initial offer of economic proposals last week, which included a raise in the minimum salary for players increase eligibility and contract guarantees for players under team control in salary arbitration, and a revamped revenue sharing system, which would create stronger financial incentives for teams to spend a higher portion of their revenue on payroll and field competitive rosters. Now, both sides believe that their plan would be the most effective solution to fans' biggest concern. What's that? Parity between large and small market teams. Amen to that. Now, the MLB argued that the revenue disparity is due to unchecked spending by large market clubs, and that restricting teams' payrolls with a salary cap and floor will rein in their spending. Conversely, the union, the Players Association, said that the source of the competitive imbalance is the lack of spending by smaller market teams whose owners can actually afford to spend more on salaries, but they choose not to in order to keep profits high while receiving large revenue from distributions. Boy, this is going to be real interesting to see how this pans out. In the meantime, two senators, Ted Cruz and Maria Cantwell, have released a statement announcing the Bipartisan Protect College Sports Act. Now, this is a bill that introduces federal legislation to protect student athletes' ability to earn money off of their name, their image, and likeness, so-called NIL, to extend requirements for schools to share revenue with student athletes and to require that schools cover student athletes' medical expenses. In exchange, the bill limits student athletes to one transfer in their collegiate careers, gives schools and the NCAA some antitrust protections, and preempts any state or local laws. Now, the bill as proposed is notably silent on the question of union organizing, thus extending the uncertainty left by a decision. This was 10 years ago by the National Labor Relations Board, which involved 3-2-1. Now, the bill, as proposed, is notably silent on the question of union organizing, extending the uncertainty that was left 10 years ago in a 2016 National Labor Relations Board decision involving Northwestern University. That decision got a lot of play. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, the president of the Ohio AFL-CIO.
You're listening to America's Workforce with Ed Flash Ferens.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Communication Workers of America. You can find more at cwa-union.org.
America's Workforce appreciates our sponsor, the Columbus Central Ohio Building and Construction Trades Council, who represents more than 18,000 workers from 19 affiliated local unions and district councils.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers. You can find more at ifpte.org.
It takes LIUNA to keep America running. Over 70,000 public employees are part of LIUNA, the Laborers International Union of North America, delivering critical services such as healthcare and emergency response, as well as maintaining roads and sanitation systems. Even the National Postal Mail Handlers Union, representing over 47,000 U.S. postal workers, is affiliated with LIUNA. Find out what it takes for LIUNA to keep America running at liuna.org. That's liuna.org.
There is unity and strength for workers.
We are the USW.
We are the USW.
The United Steelworkers.
The largest industrial union in North America.
We represent 850,000 members in the U.S., Canada, and the Caribbean.
We work in metals,
rubber,
chemicals,
paper,
oil refining,
atomic energy, and the service sector.
We are steelworkers, standing strong and fighting for what's right.
American workers are sick of struggling to get by. It's time to get ahead. In the Teamsters Union, workers are winning industry-leading contracts, historically high wages, fully paid health care, and retirement benefits you can count on. Across the country, Teamsters fight alongside our brothers and sisters to secure a better life. It's what we've been doing and how we've been living for more than a century. When we fight, we win. Join us. Be a Teamster.
America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Iron Workers. You can find more at ironworkers.org. America's Workforce is brought to you in part by the Heat and Frost Insulators Labor Management Cooperative Trust. Find out more at insulators.org/LMCT.
America's Workforce is sponsored in part by Boyd Watterson Asset Management, LLC. Find out more about our investment solutions tailored to meet the needs of Taft-Hartley funds at boydwatterson.com.
Now, back to America's Workforce. Here's Ed Flash Ferens.
And don't forget, you can check us out on Facebook or follow us on X, formerly known as Twitter. That would be AWF Union Podcast, AWF Union Podcast. Let's go to Central Ohio and welcome Tim Burga. Tim's a longtime contributor to America's Workforce on behalf of the Ohio AFL-CIO, where he serves as president. Ohio AFL-CIO.org is a website you want to go to. And a couple of weeks ago at the Cleveland Port Council meeting, Tim was the honorary speaker, and apparently these were union leader roundtables, one of many in the state of Ohio, kind of to get union leaders energized for this very, very, I guess, concerning political year. Tim, welcome back to the show. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate what you've been doing for all the labor unions in the state of Ohio. Talk to me about these roundtables. It was a great discussion. I know you came very well prepared, and maybe you could just run down some of the cities that you visited. Go ahead, my brother.
Good to be back with you, Flash. Yeah, the Port Council meeting in Cleveland was a precursor to the 7-city regional tour that I did to talk about the upcoming November general elections and what's at stake. So we were actually started off after the Port Council came back to Cleveland to do a broader meeting there. Then we were Cincinnati, Dayton, Akron, Marietta, Columbus. So tried to hit important regions, Toledo, obviously. And this will be the first round of roundtables that I do with labor leaders and activists at the local level to talk about the issues that matter most that'll be debated this election and where the candidates stand on it, and what the AFL-CIO and labor is going to be doing to educate union members and mobilize the vote. It went very well. Enthusiasm at all the stops.
What about the issues here? What issues are resonating right now? Obviously, the gas prices they're hurting everybody, and not just in the state of Ohio, and especially on the east and west coast. I mean, they're much higher than in the Midwest area. But the issues, can you speak to that? And obviously, the game plan here is to make sure that, whoever you speak to translates this message to the members.
Affordability, the number one issue by far at all the stops, talking about the cost of everything. And really, the idea that we've got entrenched government that's been corrupt, that's been lying to people, that's been focused on just about everything except affordability, and that working people and union leaders want to see a government that actually works for them. It's a reckoning coming, and that was a question I posed at the labor roundtables. It's a reckoning where we can reward the same failed leadership that has, by and large, given government over to billionaires and the super wealthy, or we can have a government that gets back to supporting the people. Overwhelmingly, the response was we need a dramatic change, and that change really was seen by our endorsed candidates for governor and U.S. Senate with Amy Acton and Sherrod Brown. They are really in each one of these town hall meetings resounding that, they will be with us on all the issues that matter most. When you look at the whose side are they on, which we rolled out at these labor town hall meetings, it was pretty clear that Acton and Brown are on our side.
That's what we want. Absolutely. You said something at that meeting in Cleveland that I want to talk about, and we're going to go back 20 years. 2006. Bush was in office for 6 years at that point. Things weren't going well. And in fact, that's the year that Sherrod Brown won his Senate seat. He was a longtime House member. I remember when he started his campaign and he said, yeah, this was the time to do it. And obviously he's back in the fold now. Similar time right now? What do you think?
When you look at the data and you look at the primary election that happened in May, it was the largest Democratic turnout in a midterm primary since 2006. So there's some similarities. I don't make predictions on how elections are going to go, but it seems to me that what I'm feeling on the ground is being backed by the primary turnout data and public polling on the candidates, which says Democrat candidates right now have momentum and there's enthusiasm with the Democrat voters and not as much with the mega Republican voters, quite frankly. And the independents in Ohio cast a large shadow in our elections and, will play a major, major role in determining the outcome of these statewide elections. But there's something happening. The candidates are going to have to make their case to Ohioans on whose side are they on. And we tally them up, Flash, as you know, and we get that information out to our members and then we encourage them to vote.
Well, it's interesting what you said about the turnout in the primary. Hopefully that turnout will be monumental come November. Are you at all concerned here? Now we're hearing all stories about the SAVE Act, and which would require a voter ID, which we have in the state of Ohio. But nonetheless, with what's going on in Washington and the presence of, the ICE agents in various parts of the country, I know you can only speak to what's going on in the state of Ohio, but people might be intimidated going to the polls. How do you feel about that moving forward?
Those in power will do everything possible to stay in power. We've seen that from the Trump administration and the GOP in Congress, and in particular. And they're in trouble when they are encouraging all these Republican states to do mid-census gerrymandering, which set off a race to the bottom, quite frankly, which is disgusting to see what's going on with that. And then you look at poll taxes, when we look at things that are going on, voter ID, which is already, as you say, the law in Ohio. The Republicans are feeling uneasy when they feel like they've got to put something on the statewide ballot to change the dynamic of what they see as a lackluster turnout for them. So they're looking to put voter ID on the ballot as a constitutional amendment, which is already the law of the land. Instead of focusing on making life better for Ohioans, dealing with the affordability crisis, once again, Flash, they're playing politics. And call me a cynic, but it's pretty obvious that's what's happening.
Let's focus on the state legislature here now. Do we see anything on the agenda to call attention to right now? There's folks that always like to, cater to their base, bring up right to work, things like that, attacks on unions. And I know there's a couple of pieces of legislation that we talked about with Melissa Cropper, who serves as Secretary Treasurer of the AFL-CIO and head of the teachers union. But what do you see? Anything that you want to highlight here going forward?
Well, more giveaways of taxpayer money, the money that we send to the state of Ohio that does not make it back to our local governments to fund libraries, schools, and safety forces. So more of that by way of school vouchers and doing away, quite frankly, with the local government fund. Localities are really hurting. More of the same as it relates to that. But as I'd indicated, I expect the General Assembly this week or next week, sometime this month, to put voter ID on the ballot as a constitutional amendment. Whatever you may think of voter ID, I happen to think if you're going to require voter ID to vote, you have to make sure that all eligible voters have a free ID. And 3,000 voters in the state of Ohio last year that were eligible to vote were turned away because they did not have a proper ID. So they're going to look to put that on the state constitution, not because it's not already the law of the land, but they think it might gin up a certain subset of voters this November, which I think is folly, but also indicates that they feel like there's concern out there for their candidates.
So, Tim, explain that to me. They want to make it a part of the Constitution. Now, do they just go to the legislature on that? Do they have to go to the people for that? How does that work?
Well, the Republicans have a supermajority in both the House and Senate here in the state of Ohio, so they can, by certain vote, just put it directly on the ballot. So they don't even have to go get the signatures like we've done so many times to put things on the ballot in the state of Ohio. They can just do it by vote. be watching that this week and next week, Flash.
Okay, we'll be checking that out. Now, you're going to be going to the AFL-CIO convention this weekend, and we're going to be talking to Fred Redmond, Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO, on Friday of this week. Just wondering, have you been through these before? What's pretty much on the agenda right now, Tim?
Well, we're expecting a big turnout in Minneapolis of union members and leaders and activists from around the country. A number of things that will be dealt with, obviously the important midterm elections, but a lot of conversation about artificial intelligence, what that does to the workforce. So I suspect we'll see resolutions on the floor dealing with that. I expect more resolutions and discussions about modernizing the movement, internal type of structural stuff within the AFL-CIO and our affiliated unions. So a lot to be on the agenda for sure, and we're excited, Ohio, to do our part in being there.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about artificial intelligence, and that includes the Pope. I never thought I'd be hearing a Pope talking about this, but hopefully that's going to resonate in the years ahead here, because this is a very likable Pope. So we'll see what happens here. Well, Tim, I'm going to leave it on that note. I thank you so much for your contributions here to America's Workforce. Have a safe trip to Minneapolis, and we'll talk to you next month, okay?
Okay, thank you.
And that'll be it for yet another edition of America's Workforce. Coming up tomorrow, Dorsey Hager of the Columbus Central Ohio Building Trades. Until then, all of you, have a safe and wonderful day.
That concludes another episode of the America's Workforce Radio Podcast. Thanks for listening, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss a show. America's Workforce is a production of Labor Tools and BMA Media Group. Find out more information online at labortools.com.